Hi, everyone. Welcome to Daily Revelations. So today I am continuing in Acts. I was in Acts over the weekend, and I may get back to some things that God spoke to me on Saturday and Sunday, but kind of took some time off from videos just to kind of sit and soak in it and see what God is trying to do in my heart and how to apply all that to my life, because there's some things I'm sorting through right now. And God is so good. His word applies to everything that we go through. And sometimes it can make sense right away. And sometimes we just need to soak in it, like I said. And so maybe I'll come back to those topics on Thursday, usually when I do my biblical theology class, and sort out those things in a group, which is so wonderful. And I encourage you, if you're doing and reading the Bible by yourself, you really need other people to bounce things off of. And that's why I'm here. I'm sharing with you. This keeps me accountable to say I'm in my Bible every day, but you need to be accountable to somebody as well. And it's a lot of what we're talking about today in Acts 17 and 18 is the church and how God knits us together to mix grace and truth. Because grace and truth, if we do it on our own and we try to apply truth and we try to apply grace, it doesn't end up very well. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit of what Acts 17 and 18 say and why that is. So Paul, being led by God, what he did when he went into new cities to proclaim the gospel was he went into the Jewish synagogues first, knowing full well that the Jews were probably going to be his worst enemies, but that God still loved them and wanted those that were willing and had open hearts to hear the truth. So for 3 weeks, each Sabbath, he would go in and he would explain the truth of the scriptures and how they pointed to Jesus. After that, he went out and ministered to the Gentiles, which was everyone that was non-Jewish. That's what the Bible, when they say Gentile, that's what they mean. So in Thessalonica, it didn't turn out very well. The Thessalonican Jews were mad. They were very mad. And so eventually Paul moved on to Berea. And the Bereans were just wanted to dive into truth. They were like, show us more, reveal more truth to us. And they took out their scriptures and said, we're hungry for it. Now, why? Why the difference? Well, if you boil it all down, and what I wrote in my notes, the difference hinged on how they viewed themselves. And the difference on how we accept truth hinges also on when God stirs up what we think is true and what he says is true. Do we stick with what the Thessalonians did, and that is their own self-righteousness, their own truth? Or are we, when we are stirred like the Bereans, and say, yes, I knew there was something more, and I know that in my heart, I am not good, and what I was believing, what I was doing, wasn't exactly right. And now, God, you're showing me more truth, and I am hungry for it. Show me more. There begins the process. And that's why I said stirred to spurred to submerged. So here's the stirring. Now they're submerging themselves. The Thessalonians, they were spurring on to persecuting Paul and Silas at this point. They did everything in their power to stir up everyone else and say what we're doing is right, what they're doing is wrong. The Bereans, on the other hand, just started digging in more and coming closer to God. And so they were spurred on in different ways. The Bereans created a church. They started ministering in grace and love to those. And the Thessalonians that were against hearing truth, all they did was create a mess, basically. And then we meet Priscilla and Aquila. And Paul starts traveling with them. They were of the same trade, tent makers. And they come upon this man named Apollos. And Apollos was very strong in the truth. And I thought it was really interesting that these stories went along with each other. Because when Apollos was preaching truth, he was preaching truth with a changed heart. Except there was a little bit of something missing. And what Priscilla and Aquila saw it. And they took him aside and said, you don't have enough grace in this message. And we need you to understand that grace is part of truth. They work together. And when we become submerged in our faith, that is the part that holds us to staying faithful, is realizing that truth can't hold us in a relationship with God, and grace alone can't hold us in a relationship with God. We need to intermix them. And the best way to do that is to come alongside other believers who are more gifted in grace or truth. And so for Apollos, they sent him off and they said, you need to go to this city where most of the people were saved by God's grace, but know nothing of truth. And so Apollos went there and they encouraged him on how much what he can do with grace. And then Apollos used his gift to minister to them and teach them truth. And also God used that gift for him to speak up for them when they didn't have the words or the insight or the wisdom yet to explain what God was doing in them to the Jews that were living in their area. So what I ended up writing in my notes was that when we're redeemed, we have this large bubble of grace, but it has to be based on the core of truth. And when God works on our hearts, we need to have this large bubble of truth that's hinged on grace, because we live very far away from what is right. If we live like the Thessalonians and say, I have this self-righteous understanding of what God does, and I'm going to stick with that. But we need to allow God to teach us his truth and forgive us with that grace hinged in the middle. And so those are the two things. And that's when we become submerged. So God stirs us and says, what's really in your heart? And then he spurs us on from that to either show that we are reacting in the evil of our heart, or we are diving into his truth and admitting our depravity without him, which is what leads us closer to God. And then after that, we need to become submerged in both truth and grace. And if you are a person who tends to lean on the more grace side and not have a lot of knowledge and understanding, then you need to come around people that do. Because for those people like me who tend to lean on the more knowledge side, I need to be around people who are covered in grace, because that's my struggle, is forgiving, moving on, because I can see things black and white really easily. But when I surround myself with people who have that gift of grace and I can pair it up with my gift of truth, that's when the beauty of God's message comes out. And I want to read Ephesians 1:7-8, because this was another thing that came up in my reading today that just really kind of puts the cap on how grace and truth work together. It says, in him we have redemption, in Jesus, through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, our sins, according to the riches of his grace. So this forgiveness of sins is based on this grace, but which he lavished on us. There was no truth involved in that this is open for everyone. This is not if you do this, then this happens. That's available for everyone. But in his wisdom and insight, this is where the truth comes in, which he made known the mystery of his will, according to his kind intentions, which he purposed through Jesus. This is God God's plan all along was truth. It's a truth that doesn't change. And his truth that doesn't change was redemption happens through Jesus. And so that sums up everything of the law. So both of them work together. And we can't let them oppose one another, because grace only happens because of the truth of God. And the truth of God is grace. And so we need all of that. So let God stir your heart. Let him spur you on because of what's stirred up, and see your depravity. I know the more I see the sinfulness in myself, the closer I come to God, because I know I need him more. And then submerge yourself in the community that he gives you so that you can balance grace and truth properly. So just be encouraged. Thanks for joining me today on Daily Revelations. Sorry, it was a really long one today, but kind of soaked up from the weekend. So anyways, have an awesome day, and I'll see you again next time on Daily Revelations. Bye, everyone.